Hello, everyone. Welcome to our virtual event space. My name is Allie. You might recognize me from our Lake Forest Park location. I'm your host for this evening. I am so excited to be introducing Cara Black and Rhys Bowen here to discuss the newest thriller in the Aimée Leduc series, Murder at the Porte de Versailles. But before we get into the good stuff, on behalf of all of us here at Third Place Books, I just want to quickly thank you all so much for tuning in. For those of you who may not know, we are an independent bookstore with 3 locations in the Seattle area, and we are having more and more events in person, which is so exciting. But our online event program is sticking around to connect readers and authors in a virtual space. So thank you all so much for tuning in and for buying books. Your support is what makes all of this possible. If you haven't gotten your hands on a copy of any of the books that come up this evening and you would like to, I will be linking books in the chat. For those of you in the Seattle area, come on in, grab a copy off the shelf, or you can place an order online and come pick them up in store. Or if you're not local or not leaving your house, we of course ship. So go ahead and follow those links in our chat over to the website. While you're on our website, I definitely encourage you to check out some of our other upcoming events. We have an exciting roster coming up this spring. So if you'd like to stay in touch with our community, you can sign up for our newsletter. It's just a weekly event or a weekly update about events and exciting releases, our online book clubs, and of course, follow us on any of the major social media platforms. We are at Third Place Books for the quickest updates and recommendations. So tonight we are here for about an hour, and towards the end, we will be taking questions. So if you have any questions, which we very much hope that you do, go ahead and leave those in the Q&A box, which should be either at the top or bottom of your screen. It is different than the chat box, which is great for virtual applause and for connecting with each other. I absolutely invite you to share where you're tuning in from in chat. When it comes time for questions, though, do make sure those end up in the Q&A so we can most easily find them. While you're in our chat and question spaces, I just want to remind you to please lead with kindness and refrain from any inappropriate behavior or harassment. And finally, should any technical issues arise, which does sometimes happen, we will work as quickly as we can to resolve them. And we appreciate your patience and understanding. All right. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get settled in, get cozy. I am so pleased to introduce Cara Black, the author of now 20 books in the New York Times bestselling Aimée Leduc series, as well as Third Place Books' favorite, 3 Hours in Paris. She has received multiple nominations for the Anthony and McCavity Awards, and her books have been translated into a bunch of languages. In conversation this evening, I'm so thrilled to welcome Rhys Bowen, the New York Times bestselling author of the Molly Murphy and Royal Spinous historical mysteries, as well as the Edgar Award nominated The Venice Sketchbook, as well as other internationally bestselling historical novels. She's won over 20 major awards to date and is published in another bunch of languages. So the book tonight is Murder at the Porte de Versailles, the newest book in the Aimée Leduc series, with which Lee Child called wry, complex, sophisticated, intensely Parisian, and one of the very best heroines in crime fiction today. So thank you, authors, so much for being here. Audience members, oh, I see you. Welcome, Betsy and Margot. If you need anything, of course, let me know in the chat. Don't be shy. We love, love, love to hear from you. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass the stage to our authors. So welcome, both of you.
Hi. Thank you. Well, hi, everybody. I'm Rhys Bowen, and it's my great pleasure tonight to interview my dear friend, Cara Black. In past years, Cara and I had books out at the same time in March, and we did book tours together, and we had weird and wonderful adventures. Unfortunately, the last few years, we've had to give up on those, but I get to at least see Cara just like this, which is lovely. I'm in Arizona, she's in California, and Third Place Books is in Seattle. That's one of the wonderful things about the pandemic, is that we can reach out across the world. And so I'm very thrilled tonight to introduce Murder at the Porte de Versailles, which is the 20th book in Cara's series. So Cara, lovely to see you, even if it's far away. Hi.
No, I know, Rhys. Nice to see you. I wish we were together, but we will maybe in May when you come home and I come home. And
yeah,
we'll
then we'll go to
yeah.
the farmer's market and have a lovely lunch.
Sounds wonderful. Yes.
Yeah. So let's start off tonight. This is the 20th book in the series featuring Aimée Leduc. So for the few people, there might be a few people in the universe who haven't yet met Aimée. And so maybe you could tell us a little bit about her and where she came from, what started her.
Sure. Well, thank you, Rhys, and thank you for doing this. And thank you, Ali, for hosting this in Third Place Books, which I love because I've probably gone every year. I love the community and I love that they're a thriving independent bookstore and that you all support them. So yes, Aimée Leduc. So Aimée is my half French, half American female detective who now in the 20th book has a 3-year-old child. And just to recap, we first met Aimée Leduc in Murder in the Marais, which is my first book, which is set in 1993. And we meet Aimée Leduc there. She's taken over her father's detective agency, and he'd taken it over from his father, so her grandfather's agency. And after his death in this mysterious bomb explosion, she takes it over, enlists her friend, a computer hacker extraordinaire, René, who happens to be 4 foot tall, and they turn it to IT. So she has been running this agency, and now we are in, let's see, that was 1993. And that story was based on my friend's mother, who was a hidden Jewish girl during the German occupation in World War II in the Marais. But now, Aimée, it's about 8 years later, and we've gone through her pregnancy, we've gone through several of her amours, and now she has a 3-year-old, Chloe, and it's a very bittersweet time for Aimée because it is the anniversary of her father's death, and they're at Père Lachaise Cemetery. And then it's also Chloe's birthday that day. She's 3 years old. So that's kind of where the story starts. And throughout the story, we've kind of gone through the time. We're still paying in francs, okay? We can smoke in the cafes. So we're still in that era. And Aimée's gone through different investigations. And hopefully I've mirrored some of the social issues that were going on, during this time. But.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit, who is Aimée? I mean, describe her to us and what sort of person she is and where she came from in your imagination.
Well, I have been known to be a little tactless from time to time. Not that, right? You've never noticed that with me, but never, right? But Aimée is a little bit tactless, and she always, as her partner René points out, you could not have said that. She's the kind of person who is going down, when you leave a party and you're going down the back stairs, the great line comes to you. There's a wonderful French saying for that. So, I'm tactless. I always think of what to say much later, like when I'm driving home in the car. So anyway, sort of those kind of foibles she came with. But she's taller than I am. She's thinner. She has a great eye for fashion, a fashionista. She can wear vintage clothing and throw it on because, and she lives in an apartment on Ile Saint-Louis because that's where I would like to live. So I don't know, she's kind of my alter ego, but she's much smarter on the computer. And she also has this thirst for justice. And that's what kind of drives her, which I think drives a good detective. Of course, a detective is different. I didn't want to write a woman in law enforcement because I don't know that world, but I could write as a, like someone who's a private eye, who is always an outsider. They're observing, they're gathering clues. They're paid by their client too, so they've got to satisfy a client. And it's very rare that they take something on personally, but maybe they get personally involved. So she sort of came from people I knew, friends in Paris, and I had met some female detectives, and I sort of took things from them and sort of gave Aimée, which at the time was very cutting edge, this computer security business. Now it's pretty, I mean, it's very common, it's normal, but in the 90s, this was cutting edge. So she sort of is someone who maybe I would like to be, but who does things to serve people, and help people who have no voices. So.
You didn't mention the fact, the penchant for bad boys that she tends to have.
Of course. Yes. Yeah.
Or the black leather and the impossibly high heels and the pink Vespa. I mean, she's a fun lady, isn't she? I mean, she's a larger than life lady in many ways. She's just fun to write about. So this is book 20 in the series now. Tell us a little bit about the story, as much as you can without giving too much away.
Okay, so no spoilers, but so it's right after 9/11. So we're basically in November after 9/11. And here is Aimée, the anniversary of her father's death. It's Chloe's birthday. And so she's got to get herself together and try to move on. So so we go to the birthday party in Aimée's flat. And of course, Martine, Aimée's best friend, who she's known since the lycée, has thrown the party. Everything is fuchsia. Chloe's got her little early birthday boots that are zebra striped that she will just sleep in. She won't take off. They're running around. But of course, this is a Parisian birthday party. So there is vintage champagne, there's foie gras, there's a macaroon cake, and so this big party is going on. And Aimée realizes everyone in her life that is important to her, her family, even though they're not biologically related, are there. Her godfather, Commissaire Morbier, who's in the police, who she's had many problematic relationships with. Boris and Michou, the gay couple who are her best friends and who take care of Chloe. And there's Martine, her best friend from the lycée, who's a journalist. There is René, her partner at the agency. And there is Milak, the biological father of Chloe. Now we've gone through some things with him, and he's been very bad boy. But that got old. And now he has left and gone to live in Brittany, but he loves taking care of Chloe. And he's a good father when when it suits him. And he's pressuring Aimée to move to Brittany. And she's like, at the birthday party, like, why are you, I can't answer you right now. And he's saying, well, you can work up in Brittany, you can work remotely. And I have to say, Rhys, I think I was writing this in the pandemic. So probably that got in there, the working remotely here, But I mean, actually she could even then, because she does computer security. But so he's saying you can work at the farm. I've got horses. Chloe can do the garden. We're right on the sea. The air is so good. And Aimée is thinking, well, she likes having the cafe at the corner, right? She sort of grew up with that on Ile Saint-Louis. But she doesn't think there are cafes at the end of the farm field. No. And she's also feeling hugely guilty because is she being selfish not to do this? She has this business to run anyway. There's all this going on. And then it's time to open presents. And of course, you know how it is opening a 3-year-old's birthday party presents, crazy. And Boris goes, mon Dieu, I forgot Chloe's gift. It's on my desk at work. He hops in a taxi. Now, Boris works at the police laboratory in the 15th arrondissement. And we've met him before and we've been at his lab. Okay, so he goes, open the presents, people go home, Chloe goes to bed, they're doing the dishes and they realize Boris has not returned. A phone call comes and there's been a bomb explosion at the police laboratory. Boris is found unconscious in the rubble, still alive, and he's got explosive under his fingernails. So Boris is a suspect in this bomb explosion. And that sets the story off. How could this happen? He wouldn't have done that. And Aimée is forced, she feels she can't leave Boris, because the police think that he's a suspect. Even the people in the lab are convinced that Boris did this. So there's a lot of twists and turns after that. But again, we're in the backdrop is 9/11, you know, with the huge, with the, you know, the aftermath of that.
Yeah. Now that's another, it's another of these page-turning, breath-holding stories that you write so well. And I know when you're going to set something in an arrondissement, you go and you look there and something really sparks your interest. What was it in this story that you thought, I really have to write that? Was it the time, the 9/11, or what was it that drove it?
Well, partly that, you know, because that would be the next point in Aimée's life, you know, if I continued writing, which I did. Well, one of the events, there were like two of them. One of them was that my friend who lives in the 15th arrondissement, which is where the story takes place. And just to let you know, this arrondissement is, the population is the size of Bordeaux. So it's a lot of people. You might not know it because you might have gone through it because there's no monuments there, you know. It's very residential. And so my friend who lived there, when he was young, he lived in an apartment and it was right on the same street as the police laboratory. And his bedroom window faced the police laboratory. And he fell out of bed one night, he woke up on the floor and he's like, what happened? What? And there had been a bomb explosion right across the street in the police laboratory. And the next morning, you know, his parents said, oh, it's okay. It was just the Basques, you know, they're always bombing everything, Basque separatists, you know. And it's true at the time, they did do bombing, but it was a political statement. No one was ever hurt. That was their whole thing, that, I mean, that they wouldn't hurt people, but it would be a political statement that we need to be separate. We need our own autonomous region. So when he was telling me this, I was, you know, thinking about that and thinking about how bombing, you know, was very kind of normal, oddly. I mean, in that time, the 70s, 80s, and 90s, I mean, in London, you had the IRA, Clinton, you know, you have, when I first went to Paris, I remember there were people with Uzis walking down the street, you know, in front of the museum. So it was a whole other world. But then 9/11 just kind of amped everything up, and there was a big explosion down in Toulouse, which is down south. It's where they have the aerospace industry like NASA. And there was a huge explosion there 10 days after 9/11. Nobody was talking about that. I don't think we even heard about it here. So I knew there, you know, I thought there was something going on. So just to make everybody uneasy. And then my friend, so I was in the 15th arrondissement having lunch with a friend who lives there. And she said, let's go to an Iranian restaurant. And I'm going, oh, okay, fine, but that's kind of odd. She goes, no, there's a lot of them around here. There's some Iranian shops. This is Tehran-sur-Seine, you know, Tehran on the Seine, full of Iranian immigrants. And I was like, I couldn't believe that. And then then I come back home and I go to my book group, and a woman in my book group is from Iran, and she goes, oh yeah, my cousin lives there. And you know, and so then I got to meet the cousin who lived in Paris, and very cultured, very, you know, sophisticated, educated. And so I was introduced to this kind of Iranian world, and she explained to me that the Iranians came to France like in three waves. First, there was the Iranians who came like in the 60s, late 50s, 60s, early 70s with the petrodollars. They bought apartments, especially in the 15th. They wanted to send their children to university. Then the second wave of people who fled with the Shah. And then there were the people after that, the Ayatollah's hitmen, who came to do hits on certain political Iranian emigres. And so that was just a whole other component of the story I hadn't realized. So that kind of sort of came from that. And then I met a man who worked at Interpol when Interpol was just outside of Paris, just across the river. And there was a huge bombing there. And so I got to actually speak to him on the phone. He called from Algeria. And so I think he's a spook, you know, he wouldn't tell me his name or let me call him back. But I kind of used everything he said because he was actually there at this bombing. So it was ripe with all these political undertones of this very sort of seemingly placid residential arrondissement. You know, the people move there when they've already finished going to university and clubbing, and this is when they have children, they want a nice bigger, you know, if you can have bigger apartment, nicer schools, right, you know, very easy to get to the center, but again, not a destination for tourists. So there was a lot under the surface that I could find.
You know, you have the most interesting friends. You go somewhere and someone told you about when they were in a bombing next to the police lab, and then someone else calls you from Algeria. You know, I go and I do my research in England. Someone says, oh, let's have tea together. And I make some really nice scones. I mean, that's about as exciting as I get. Now, what am I doing wrong here? So anyway, the interesting thing is that these books that you wrote that were contemporary when you started are now sort of being called historical, aren't they? Because they're 20 years old. So what are the challenges of writing something, putting yourself back into it? Because I can't remember, you know, did I have a cell phone in 2001? What did that cell phone look like? I can't even remember those things. So how do you manage that to get back to Aimée's life?
Well, like you, I know when you do your research for Molly Murphy, you know, you go, you know, to the newspaper archive. I mean, now they're all the New York Times or digital, you know, you can go to archives, you can see photos. I can do that too, you know. So I always, when I'm looking at that day, I go to get the French paper. I think Stanford, I go down there and it's all digitized, and I can look at that day. I can see what the weather was like, what was happening in the world, who was coming into Paris, what political upheaval was going on, what was on sale. Best thing, that's the best way to know, you know, how you can see how big the cell phones were, because there were cell phones, how big the computers were, you know, and you can see all that because it's on sale. You can see what strikes and demonstrations are happening that day in Paris, because that's always in the newspaper, right? So you know, the nurses are striking at the hospital, you've got to go around this way, or we won't go there today. So that's really grounding, you know, to pull me at that time. Also the fashion, old magazines. I can look at the fashion, which actually, you know, there's a lot of things people are wearing nowadays. But yeah, I can do that. I can go into the newspapers. I can look at the magazines. I love seeing what's on sale too. So, but again, it's also, I mean, I have to bring people back to remember when we had routers. Remember routers before Google, really. I mean, it was Google was just being developed. So that mindset, I think, is different. And that's, you know, that's really, I really work on that to say, remember. And then, of course, there's young people who read this and go, what does that mean, a dial phone? You know, what is that, right? I don't know. And they don't, you know, they've never used that. So, you know, it's a challenge, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Yeah, because you want to take, when you write, well, not historical, when you write in a particular time and place, the object is not to tell people about it, it's to take people, isn't it? It's to make people think, oh, I'm in Paris in 2001. So I'm currently writing a book that's set in World War II, partly in Paris. And of course I have gone because of the COVID restrictions. And I thought, wouldn't it have been fun if you and I were researching in Paris at the same time? We could have got up to such hijinks. It would have been such fun. So if we had, what would have been the first thing that we would have done together?
Well, first of all, it doesn't mean we still can't do it, Rhys. I mean, you know, we could do it in the future. Well, yes, I mean, I want to go, and I think you would enjoy this, the Café de la Paix, which is super fancy. It's all been redone and regilded and very belle epoque. I mean, it's gorgeous. And I know you like that kind of thing, and so it's really speaks of that time, all redone. The menus got this special Michelin chef, you know, but it still has the traditional French. And so you can be inside or you can be outside, and you sit on the terrace right across from the opera, right? Gorgeous.
Yeah.
So I suggest we go there. And I don't think it's an impossibility either, right? Someday.
Or we just have something simple, like a little champagne and a few oysters, and that would take care of it, wouldn't it?
I think so. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So you talked about looking at newspapers and things. So when you go to Paris, tell us what your research is like when you go to Paris, when you're not meeting someone who got bombed a few weeks ago, you know. What else do you do?
What else do I do? I went, I'm a vegetarian, but I'm good friends with a butcher because he's a horse butcher. And he told me all about when this area, now you can see it's, the books down at the bottom. Well, actually, I think I took this photo, I'm not sure. This is part of the old abattoir, the slaughterhouse for horses. And they had, which is not in the cover, the old, iron metal glass awninged, market by Eiffel, because the guy who did Eiffel Tower, he did lots of work, anyway, the open air market with the glass, Belle or Art Nouveau look. So this is that place, and there's an antique book market there on the weekends. Gorgeous. Okay. Oh, it's drool worthy, honestly. It's just wonderful. And so I'm gonna, when I go to Paris, I'm gonna go right there on the weekend, go to the, antique book market, because they've got everything, amazing things. And then I like to go to a lot of brocantes, which are they're like mini garage sales, mostly, by people in the area, certain street, like a church puts them on, or a community, several people, and the proceeds go to a nursery school or whatever, like rummage sales. So those are, when the weather starts to get nice, those are every weekend. And I love those, because sometimes it's a simple thing of people going through their attic and just taking it out there, or, otherwise. So you can find amazing things. I once found in a wallet, leather wallet from a woman who, I think she was selling it out of some relative. It was from the 1940s, and I just thought, a woman's very nice, simple. And I just thought this woman used this, during that time, and lived in Paris. And, and then she was also selling this old mascara from during the 40s. Anyway, just amazing things. So I love those kind of props, that really help me write and, spur me to write. Flea markets, I like to walk on the Seine. I always make appointments to meet police, or especially the scientists who work in the laboratory, because they helped me a lot with this story logistically, because we do go to the laboratory, and I wanted to make it as authentic as I could. So it's really like trying to keep up my contacts, trying to go to, stopping at a patisserie or two or three, or, just as one does.
Yeah, well, it's funny, during COVID isolation, I've been going through my photos, and of course I was in Paris in 2019, and I've got loads of photos of the windows of patisseries. Isn't that, just looking at that going, oh, look at that window. Oh, talk about taking you back. I mean, we're so lucky these days, because it's so easy to take photos, isn't it? Everywhere you go, you can take millions of photographs, and then afterwards you can just reconstruct everything again. Yeah. So let's go on. This is book 20 in a series, which is, congratulations, is a huge achievement in itself.
Thank you.
But I know you wanted to set one in every arrondissement. Aren't the 20 arrondissements? Is this the last book in the series then?
Well, it would be if I hadn't made a mistake. I goofed up, and I had 2 books in one arrondissement. So now I have to do 21 books to hit every arrondissement. And I was like, because when I sold my first book, I was just so happy to sell it. I was like thrilled. I was like, it was amazing, and then my editor asked me, if I was writing a series, and I said, what? She goes, well, and I said, of course I'm writing a series. So, along the way, your series, I remember the Evan Evans series when I first met you. Then there was the Murphy, which we have right here. The newest one. Yeah. And then you went into standalones, and So, you know,
Yeah.
you're so courageous, kind of my model, because I was afraid to sort of step out of my, I mean, I do love going to Paris. There's no hardship there, but, you know, it was kind of like time to step out of my comfort zone and to write something different, you know, exercise that other muscle, find the muscle and use it. And with a lot of support, and my editor really encouraged me, I wrote 3 Hours in Paris. So it's,
for those of you who haven't read 3 Hours in Paris, it is an absolutely brilliant page-turning thriller about World War II in Paris, and about 3 hours that could have changed the whole course of the war. So yeah, I really recommend. I think it's right up there with The Day of the Jackal and all those sort of things. So well done.
Yeah.
And are you going to write another one of those?
well, funny you should ask, because I have written a follow-up, which I'm actually, my editor just sent me the first 70 pages, so I'm editing that furiously. Yeah. Kate, we have Kate, it's a follow-up, we don't call it a sequel, and it's set in 1942. And of course, I had no idea for a title, and you, Rhys, came up with the title, which you can say, because Night Flight to Paris.
Night Flight to Paris, yes. And
You came
said,
up with that.
You said, but nobody flies. And I said, make them fly.
They fly, yeah. A lot.
Great. So, but what will happen to Aimée? Will you just walk away from her when you've done all the arrondissement and do something different?
I don't know, because I'm working on that one now. I'm about 3/4 of the way through that story, which I want to finish as a draft before I go to Paris, but I don't, that's pretty shaky. I want to do that story and see how I feel. You know, there's a lot of ideas. So this trip to Paris, it'll be, you know, fact checking and going over and looking at things, but it'll also be opening to new ideas, you know, what I could do. So, but
Which
keep it open.
arrondissement?
Which arrondissement?
Yeah.
The 19th.
And where is that?
Well, if you go up from, if you've ever taken the metro up to Stalingrad, you go up, anyway, you go up the Canal Saint-Martin and you keep going, and then you get to La Villette, right? The Geode and the Science Museum. You just keep going up there. Yeah, it's very big. It's got some edgy parts. It's got a beautiful park, the Butte-Chaumont, gorgeous views. You've got the Musea, which is like all these colored little workers' houses that are hugely expensive now, gorgeous. So, you know, it's got these little interesting pockets. And, you know, it's kind of nice, really nice, very Parisian.
Okay, good. And it's going to be called? I
don't know. Murder on the Canal, maybe? I don't know. Maybe you can help me with that.
Yeah. Well, Canal Saint-Martin is a nice title, really, isn't it? Murder on the Canal Saint-Martin. Anyway, let's just talk about Aimée a bit, because a lot of her cases are intensely personal. You know, I think nearly every book she gets involved in solving something because it involves a family member or someone she very cares about, like Boris in this one. Did you intend that when you started it, that she was going to be that sort of person who really wanted to make things right for people she loved? Or did she just take over and say, this is what I'm going to be investigating?
Well, I think, I mean, the first books I read were Sarah Paretsky, Sue Grafton, who, you know, have these gutsy women who just, you know, take no prisoners, and they, you know, they're in a supposed man's world, at least at that time. You know, not many women were in that. So I think Aimée came from, you know, and having a father who was a former policeman, being, you know, her mother abandoning them when she was 8 years old, and being raised by a single father. Well, the grandfather, Claude, who I fell in love with, raises her too. But so she grew up with men, you know, grew up with cops. She knows that world. She knows how people have each other's back, and she knows how rotten that can be as well. Just, you know, because they shafted her father, and she had to prove that he was not corrupt. And so that doesn't make her friends with anyone in the police force. But she keeps falling for cops, which is just, honestly, I have to talk to her about that.
I know. I mean, that's the problem. You know, you have characters, and once you've created them, you cannot rein them in. They go and do things you wouldn't do yourself, and you think, why are you doing this? But you know.
Right. The other day, I was like, what are you doing? Why did you get in bed with him? What's with you? You know, anyway. But
yeah, I know. I wondered that too. Like, are you crazy, girl? Don't do this. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And you know, some of her cases, I mean, this poor woman, what she's been through, it's a wonder she's still walking, you know, let alone in her high heels. You've had her, you know, she's been temporarily blinded, she's been shot at, she's been knocked out, has she been stabbed? She was stabbed once, wasn't she?
Yeah.
I mean, this poor woman, she has, her cases are really harrowing. And I find this book I'm writing right now, which is going to be my heroine as a courier during World War II and has just been captured by the Germans. And I know what's going to happen to her. And I'm finding it really hard. So can you detach yourself when you know something really bad's going to happen to Aimée, or do you actually feel it personally?
Well, no, I mean, you have to feel it personally to write it like that. I mean, yeah, I have to feel that, and it's hard. You know, it's very hard. When I wrote a torture scene in 3 Hours in Paris, with it it's, you know, where they stick someone in the tub with the water. That's my worst fear, is drowning. You know, my worst fear is drown. I mean, you can kill me any other way, just don't drown me, okay? Don't put me in a place and hold my head underwater. And so but I had to go there to have that, experience. It was a man, but you know, I think you've really got to go there. If you intend to do it, you can't go halfway. You know, you've got to go full on. You've got to do it. But Aimée also is younger. I mean, she's young when she gets beat up. I also was temporarily blinded when I was a child. I remember that. I remember the paranoia. I mean, I remember so much about it. And so it was hard, but I could pull on those memories and that experience too when Aimée was blinded, you know. So to give that credence, you know, you're always pulling some fear or pain that you've suffered that everyone else realizes. But also, I mean, for what she does, the stakes are really high. So that's the kind of book I want to read, you know. And I love reading. I love thinking that Aimée is going to have her high heels. Of course, she takes them off for roof work and wears her high tops in a black leather catsuit and goes over the roof. And that's all we can say because we don't want to reveal, but no one, you have to read the book to find out. But I love the fact that she would do that, because if you're going to do something dangerous and foolhardy, you need to look good doing it, right? Bottom line.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So did you get to go to Paris at all during the pandemic? And if so, what was it like?
Well, you remember in September, there was kind of this window before Omicron. So it was okay, we could go. So I did go in September, but I was also doing a writing workshop with another author. I did the fiction and she did the nonfiction. And we had a week long of teaching writing in a chateau near Bordeaux. I tell you, it was really tough, but you know, we managed and it was wonderful. I mean, it was fantastic. I didn't know the area. I love the region. I just want to go back, but I did manage to do that. And that was wonderful. I managed to go to Paris, and you know, I'd been vaccinated, but everyone was very careful at the time. And you know, no, you couldn't go anywhere or enter any building without your COVID pass, or you know. So yeah, I mean, I felt they were very on top of it. I went to 1 or 2 museums, not too many, but of course, even a free museum like the Carnavalet, which has just reopened after being closed and remodeled 2 years, gorgeous. But you still have to reserve, so they're keeping it, you know, the numbers down in the museums. So I feel everybody was so happy to be out on the street, you know, kind of like we are here, you know, just happy and thirsty to be with people, and you know, so were many people on the streets? Because people, you know, pictures I saw that people send home were like the streets were strangely deserted still. Was that true when you were there? Yeah, in September. In September, there were, it was like life was back at normal. People were in school. It was kind of, you know, the la rentrée. Everybody's back from vacation and school, even though it was more modified. But people were going back to life. It was there. I mean, because Parisians try and keep them out of a cafe, you know, at night or bars. I mean, because they had lifted the very strict, you know, they were on curfew. They couldn't even go out. They could go out 1 hour during the day, much stricter than we were. So they, you know, had lifted things, and you know, people like to go out. It was, I mean, of course, it wasn't totally normal, but I'm going next week, and I don't know. I mean, the pictures I see, you know, actually, it's snowing in Paris.
Wow. Yeah,
which is
actually,
rare.
I was there once, and it was an early Easter, and we were on the Bateau Mouche, and it snowed on the roof, so you couldn't actually see out because it covered the glass. So, you know, it does happen sometimes. Yeah. I've got to ask you before we stop, I've got to ask you something, because you dedicate each of your books to the ghosts. What does that mean?
Oh, thank you for noticing. Well, I mean, when I go to Paris, the first time I went, and when I go now, I mean, I walk down those streets, I mean, and I've also, well, let's just say at night, if you're walking home from the metro and no one's around, I've never feel scared. But if you're walking down a 17th century street and the lights are dim, I mean, how can you not feel the ghosts? You know, how can you not feel a presence, or the presences of so many people who, you know, have lived there, walked there, loved there, died there, whatever, you know, had children there. I mean, whatever. I mean, there is something there, and it's just very rich. I mean, I've gone by someplace and there's just a feeling, and I don't mean to be woo-woo, but I mean, this is, you know, lives lived. And I feel it's really important. And I know you do too, to walk the ground, you know, because that's how you know what it feels like, what it smells like, what it sounds like, what the taste, the textures, you know, you got to go there. And I know some of the writers in our world do not go to these locations when they write about a foreign setting. And I just think, well, I mean, it's so much better to do it. I understand if you can't, but do you know what I mean? We both like to go to this place. And I know you're a stickler for getting it right.
Yeah. You can always tell, can't you, when someone writes about a city and hasn't really been there, or has just done like the one-day tour there, you know, like she came out of the hotel and there was the Eiffel Tower. Like, well, yeah, you know, but you know, if you describe like walking down some steep steps in Montmartre and it's rained the night before and it smells a little bit of dog pee and you can smell coffee roasting down below and someone's got a gold vase, you know, you've taken people there, haven't you? When you get those little tiny details that you, like that time you wrote about the bolts of cloth being pushed down the chute in the garment district, and you decided, you wondered if Aimée could escape that way, and you know, tried to get down yourself, and you went, no, madame, you know, that's reality. That's taking someone somewhere and thinking, oh yeah. So yeah, I think we're getting very close. We should stop actually for some questions, because we've only got about 10 minutes left, and we've been talking, and are there any nice questions that have come up yet?
It looks like there are. I have a number of questions about Paris. Both Roberta and Joan would like to know what your connection with France is and when was your first visit?
My connection to France is that I just love Paris. I love France. I don't know. I mean, what's not to love, right? But I mean, I love it. And I know that there are darker sides to the City of Light. And that kind of fascinates me to explore that. I first went to France in the 70s, you know, and I sort of fell in love. It's very different from what I imagined, but it's also very much the same, you know, and I think it's kind of a love affair. And I think my books are kind of, someone said, oh, they're love letters to Paris. And I said, that sounds hokey, but kind of, yes, you know, because it's kind of the way it is. You know, I think Donna Leon, not to compare myself, but Donna Leon writes about Venice. It's kind of a love letter to Venice, right? We love Venice. You know, I read her books before I go to Venice because I want to, you know, get there, you know, so. Paris.
So sort of related, Eileen would like to know what steps and techniques you use to convey the French setting to American audiences.
Well, I think what Rhys just said about, walking down the stairs in Montmartre, after a rain. And, I think writing about Paris, or if I was writing about Tucson, Arizona, it's about bringing the reader there on that street or in that sand pit, or, you've got to use your, the sensory detail, the senses, the smells, the visuals, the auditory, what you're hearing and smelling and tasting and seeing and feeling. When I get to Paris, I always go to the Place des Vosges in the Marais, and there's all those old, 17th century coved pillars, and I just touch the stone. Because it's been pitted and pockmarked by time and bullets and whatever, and I feel back home. It's kind of my connection. This time, and I want to feel everything, and I want to get that on the page, because ideally, and I know Rhys does this, in her work, you put your reader in the footsteps of, I put you in the high heels of Aimée Leduc. You're on the street with her. You know what it's like. It could be, the butter smells from the bakery. Night could be falling. You need to be there, and I know Rhys has taken me to the New York Italian tenement. What's it called? Little Italy, and the festival there.
Yeah.
And when
San Gennaro.
Yeah. When I went there in person once, I went, this is Rhys. I was like, I knew all about it because I read your story. This festival they still do in Little Italy. It's about those details.
Yeah. And another thing Cara does and that I think takes the reader so nicely is she sprinkles just enough French slang and sort of Parisian argot to make you feel that they're actually speaking French. She doesn't sort of write her sentences like, oh, it is a lovely time to be here today, but enough that you know that people are speaking French. And I think she does that really well.
Thank you.
That actually leads wonderfully into our next question, which is, how important is speaking French for your research and experiences when you're in Paris?
Well, it's important because a lot of people only speak French with me, especially cops or people, or I want to hang out with the cafe owner. I want to get him talking, and they only speak French. So, but the French that I learned is not what people speak today. There's slang, there's, like you said, argot. And so many times, I don't know, Rhys, if you've heard this, but you see someone like, oh, bonjour. And I'm going, what? Oh, bonjour. Or bonjour, okay? They cut off the word, but you kind of got to know and be on the wavelength. Oh, you know what I mean? It's evolving as our language does too. But I asked the cops, take them to lunch, I buy them wine. So and I ask them questions. I float ideas. I say, what if? Would you do this, or would you never do this? But sometimes I don't want to take notes because that kind of inhibits them. Sometimes I record them on my iPhone so I can play it back to my friend and say, or sometimes I just, kind of wing it and I take a few notes and I ask them to repeat it or details. And they're really good because if there are technical issues, they really want me to get it correctly, and they will go slow or give me, say, oh no, and then it turns out they speak perfect English. But I'm in France, right? I need to, I need to try and speak French, I like to do that, and even though my accent's terrible, I don't care.
So this is a question from Judy. Will you please repeat the name of the cafe you mentioned earlier?
Yeah. Café de la L-A-K, P-A-I-X. That means peace. Very famous, right in the Place de l'Opéra when you come out of the metro. straight ahead is the beautiful Opera Garnier, gold gilded, gorgeous left side, the terrace of the Café de la Paix, where someday you may see Rhys and I with our bottle of champagne in that little flat pictures, and on the terrace or inside. The bathrooms are to die for. So good. You have to go to the bathroom. Just all gold and beautiful.
Yeah, that sounds all right. I could go for some.
You could do that, yeah?
Yeah, I could do that, I think. So we have a few more minutes. So if anybody has questions, go ahead and throw those in the Q&A. We'd love, love, love to hear from you. Here's another question. What is your favorite neighborhood in Paris? Where are the rummage sales and when?
Well, every neighbor, I kind of felt I didn't want to write about the 15th because I thought it was, boring, as the French, oh, so boring. I go, but you moved there because you have children, you want a bigger apartment, you want a good school. I sort of fell in love with the 15th because I found a cheese shop that I absolutely, cross town for. They have a great street market on Rue Saint-Jean, and I will just go there. Oh, it's their market. There's markets all over the city, but I mean food markets, right? And so I'll just go there because it's so good. And I go to the cheese guy because I don't know, I have to go there. So I love the 15th. I think it depends on how old you are. If you want to go out and have fun and get a lot of, maybe the 11th. I mean, it depends where you are in your life or what you want to be more central. You might want to be in the Marais. I love the Marais. I don't think you can go wrong not staying in the Marais. And the rummage sales and the garage sales, well, you can get an app, and it tells you. I don't remember what my app. So look around and find out Brocante, Brocante, and see if you can find an app for a Brocante. So it'll tell you where they are in Paris, or you can put it, outside Paris. And they'll put down, because people who want to sell at the Brocante or the flea markets usually have to pay, right, to have a stall. So, you've got to register. So there are apps. And also I just look on there's billboards and they just slap up, oh, there's a, attic sales this weekend for the church, for the children's theater group, or, those kind of hometown ones, those kind of local ones are really good, more than the professional ones. So I hope that answers your questions. But then there's a permanent flea market out at Saint-Ouen. I'm sure you've been there, Rhys, that huge one. Saint-Ouen in the north. And then there's the one at Porte de Versailles down south off the 14th, Vanves. That's established. I mean, people have stalls too. Weekend markets. Antique, and the Parc Georges Brassens has a ancient book, ancien book market, Saturday and Sunday. We're like the cover of my book.
All right, so we have time for a couple more questions. So what, if anything, do you think you'll remember from your time working on this book?
This book?
Mm-hmm.
This was a book that took longer than usual because I had more time with it. It was a book that changed. It was a book that I wrote during the pandemic. And it made me look deeper at Aimée, and it was about family and about her, and it was about what things, I think what was happening also when I was writing this was the George Floyd, murder, and about witnessing. When you're a witness, when you see something that happens, you have a responsibility, whether you choose to honor it or not. It's what happens to you. And you have your moral code. Would you do something if you witnessed a crime, murder, a crime? Would you, and maybe for many reasons you wouldn't, because you were risking something, you weren't supposed to be there. You would be caught and, put in trouble, or, you were having an affair and you weren't supposed to be there. You left work early. But would you go through that and, tell the truth? And I like to think if I saw something that I would do that. I like to think I would. I don't know, I mean, hope I would. But, those kind of ambiguous questions, what would you do? And how everybody lies, myself included. I talked with some police here in San Francisco about that. And they said, everybody lies. They always lie to us, even if they didn't do it, they're always lying. And the French policeman told me the same thing, because their police have a certain role, they're an authority figure, and what if you're someone investigator like Aimée who's trying to find the truth and vindicate someone, and everybody around you is lying for whatever reason. So I hope this is answering that question, but it's sort of helped me deepen that about a lot of times the problems are with the non-guilty, the people who are not guilty of that crime, may be guilty of something else, and how that can be a roadblock, and how being a witness carries a certain responsibility,
So thank you so much for answering these questions. We have just a little bit left. So for my last question, I would just love to know what is on the horizon for each of you. And, you don't have to tell any secrets, just whatever you can tell us, what is coming next.
Rhys?
Okay. Yeah, well, I'm a crazy person who writes 2.5 books a year now. So my next book, I just had a book come out at the beginning of March that Cara interviewed me for. So this is paying her back, because she interviewed me very nicely. So I didn't have to
with her daughter. Yeah.
I'm now writing that with my daughter. So that was very interesting. But I have a standalone coming out in August called Where the Sky Begins. And it's about a woman in London who's bombed and buried in the rubble of her house, and how she literally makes a new life for herself from nothing. So it's a very different take on World War II. It's, a home for one in which, and she's an uneducated woman and literally starts the book with nothing. So that's what's coming out next. And then at the end of the year, my next Royal Spiness book, which comes out in November, you'll be pleased to know, Cara, is called Peril in Paris, and it takes place at a Chanel fashion show. So what more could you want?
Well, what about the one you're working on with the torture scene? I'm not going to let you get
that's in the middle of being written, and that will come out next year. And at the moment, it's called Island of Lost Boys. So I think I like that title, so I'll probably fight for it.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah,
that's great. I want to read. Yeah, we have to talk. I want to know about that one in London. So I have 2 short stories coming out in the fall, which who knew? Because I try not. I have a hard time. They're very, very difficult for me. One short story for a Sherlock Holmes anthology. Who knew? Actually, it's set in Little Venice, London, which I just love. Yeah, and on they live on little houseboats there. Sherlock Holmes and the son of Oscar Wilde, based, truly they were both. Oscar Wilde had 2 sons. They had to, change their name after the scandal, but both fought in World War I. One survived, one didn't. Anyway, there's this story dealing with that, and it's called the Prideaux Monogram. And the second short story is also, it's set in Paris. It's during World War II. It's based on Odette Pilpoul, a resistante who worked in the mairie, the city hall of in the Marais, a real person who saved people. And that's for an anthology. I don't know. They're coming out. And then the next, of course, Kate Rhys is coming out in March. Night Flight to Paris, courtesy of Rhys Bowen title. But yeah.
Let's see.
I just can't keep up with Rhys. I can't. So I don't.
Let's see. My computer's thinking. Let's see. It didn't come up yet. But
is my friend Betsy here? Is there a woman called Betsy? I can't see anything.
I believe that there is.
Hi, Betsy.
I see a couple of Betsy's in the chat. So hi, Betsy.
You know the Betsy I mean. Just became a grandma. She's in my book group. Hi, Betsy.
Well, we are at the end of our evening. So I'm just going to say one last huge thank you for all of us joining tonight. For anyone who'd like to get your hands on a copy of Murder at the Porte de Versailles, I'm going to relink it in chat real quick. We've been linking books in chat left and right here. So go ahead and follow those links. Of course, let us know what you thought of this event in person or on any social media. We always love to hear from you. Cara and Rhys, huge thank you for being here this evening. It has been an absolute delight. Do you have any last things you want to say before we say goodnight?
À la prochaine. À la prochaine. In person. Next time in person.
Yes, soon.
And long live third place books, right?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. We love you. We love you.
All righty. So with that, one more huge thank you to everyone. And shall we do the awkward wave thing? Good night, everyone.
Thank you, Allie. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.